little kids are not going to remember exactly what they learned in Sunday school.
Okay.
They don't. If you sit back and think, do I remember what I learned growing up going to Islamic school on the weekend? Do you remember anything? No. But what they will remember is the feeling.
Subhanallah.
They will remember the feeling. They will remember the emotions.
A sign of the times that we see today, unfortunately, is that many from the youth and adults alike feel disconnected and far away from Islam. Have you wondered why this is so? Perhaps it is rooted in the way our deen is conveyed to us, or perhaps negative cultural biases which are not necessarily from the teachings of Islam may contribute to a traumatic and false perception of Islam. In this episode, we are honored to have Ustadh Abdul Rahman Chao, all the way from Houston, Texas, who is a graduate from the Islamic University of Madinah and Vanderbilt University, who is a passionate educator and a firm advocate of empowering youth with critical thinking. Join us as we go through his own journey of skepticism and disillusionment towards his surroundings as a youth, his search for meaning and identity, and his journey of rediscovering the truth, which is Islam. Do stay with us till the end, as it is essential to take into account its entire story, and there are many gems that we can perhaps learn from, especially in regards to how we nurture our youth and the importance of critical thinking in education. Barakallahu fikum.
ولو أن أهل القرى آمنوا واتقوا لفتحنا عليهم بركات من السماء والأرض.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsanin ila yaumiddin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Brothers and sisters, welcome to the Barakah Effect podcast. The topic of our discussion this week is empowering critical thinking in Muslim youth. And for this episode, we have streaming live all the way from Houston, Texas, Ustadh Abdul Rahman Chao. Welcome, Ustadh. Hayyakumullah.
Hayyakumullah.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for making time with us on this episode of the Barakah podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So, mashallah, Ustadh Abdul Rahman. So, for the benefit of our listeners out there who are listening, who are hearing from you for the first time, and I think I want to add as well that you were born in Malaysia. Did I get that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Mashallah. Yeah, we have this thing, Ustadh, like when we hear something, he's from Malaysia, we have this, we fanboy out for this moment, like, oh, mashallah, he's Malaysian.
Instant interest.
Yeah.
Mashallah.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah, mashallah.
Alhamdulillah.
So yeah, for the benefit of our listeners out there who are listening from you for the first time, we'd love to know just a bit more about you. So maybe I remember like hearing about you and your biography and some of your personal journey in your youth as well. So mashallah, what really caught my attention is that your journey of discovering sort of like this existential crisis that you have as a youth. So maybe can you enlighten that on how you got there and your journey towards Islam and pursuing Islamic studies, mashallah.
Yes. So first and foremost, thank you for having me and appreciate the time and the opportunity. So Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah, in the name of Allah and all praises due to Allah and salutations and blessings upon Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So a little bit about myself. So my family, my parents, they are from Taiwan. And as you know, there were two major migrations of Chinese people that went to Taiwan. So there was one that happened, hundreds of years ago. And then there was one that happened, 70 years ago, when there was the communists and the non-communists. And so the non-communists, the original Republican government, they, just ran to Taiwan. So my mother is a convert. She's a revert. And my father was born a Muslim. So my entire father's side, we are, alhamdulillah, we are born Muslim. I think we're, I don't know, I'm the 26th generation, 27th generation.
Okay.
Yeah. So my family, my grandfather originally comes from a small village in northeastern China. Most people know of Muslims in northwest China, right? We're not even talking about like Turkestan, Xinjiang, those areas. We're talking about, when they say Western China, they're referring to like Ningxia and Lanzhou and these sort of areas, which are just neighbors to Xinjiang, basically Turkestan, East Turkestan. So, you definitely hear of Muslims in southern China, like Yunnan. A lot of them, they go to like Myanmar, Thailand, but you don't hear as much from northeast China. So, my grandparents, my great grandparents, they all moved to Taiwan, because of the communists, So, and later my grandfather moved to Malaysia, and I was born in Malaysia. And subhanAllah, as a child, I was only in Malaysia for a very short period of time. And then we moved to Saudi for 2 years or almost 3 years. And then we came to America, moved around, East Coast, West Coast.
Oh, wow.
And now I am in Texas. A little bit about my journey is, I think this story that I'm going to say can be identified, and people who are born Muslim can possibly identify this. And that is, when you're born Muslim, you're sort of just put in that kind of a situation where you are growing up being Muslim, and you really don't know exactly why you're Muslim. You're just Muslim because you're told you're Muslim. You're Muslim because you have dietary restrictions. You're Muslim, and they tell you have to go to the masajid and you go pray Jum'ah. Yeah. As for why, as for how, as for questions, it wasn't really a part of our family to dig deep into it. Compared to other Chinese Hui Muslims, whether they are from China or whether they ran to Taiwan, like my father's side, we were considered extremely religious.
Oh, okay.
Because we prayed 5 times a day. So we were like, so religious, so conservative. Wow.
Oh, really? Okay.
Islam in China, unfortunately, is extremely, it has become so cultural that Islam is now simply boiled down to, just don't eat pork, don't eat, pig. Right? That's all what it is.
Yeah. Even back then, even in your years of youth, that was kind of how Islam was.
No. We were conservative in the sense that, we prayed, we fasted, but we didn't really know much about the rules of Islam. It was just like, we're Muslim, we're just, we pray and that's it.
It's like something that you had to do.
Exactly, just something that you had to do. And I think that, for the audience in Malaysia as well, and anyone around the world who's hearing this, I think that would be something not too far from the reality as well. Oh,
yeah, it's totally relatable, yeah.
Yeah, you can identify with that, yeah.
You're just born right into it, and, you don't really think about it. Yeah. It was so difficult for me because, we are Muslim, but we don't really identify with Chinese people as much because they do so many other things that we don't do. And I go to the masjid and, in America, and obviously I'm now the minority of the minority.
That's true.
Yeah. So, you've got the African Americans, you've got the Arabs, you've got the Indo-Pac subcontinent, and then you'll still find Malaysians, Indonesians, Somalis, right? Afghan. You're going to find all the ethnicities, right? Filipino Muslims. And then you're going to, especially the ones from like Mindanao, right? You'll find some of them. Right. and then then you'll find you'll find white Muslims, white American Muslims more than
even
us.
before.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
Oh, subhanallah.
And then you'll find like us, we're just like, we are like, they said like, what was it? There were some turtle species in the Galapagos Islands that were like so few left in the world. It's like, oh, these are the only 5 left in the world. So we're kind of like these like Galapagos turtles that are just like, oh yeah, we're Muslim. But alhamdulillah, it's fine, And so we were growing up just, we're Muslim. We didn't understand. So I had a lot of trouble identifying with my own culture. I had a lot of trouble fitting in with other cultures as well, just trying to understand the dominant culture, the Arab Indo-Pak culture. And in my experience, I found it to be really, really difficult emotionally and spiritually, because I go to the masjid and, I have to always explain myself, defend myself as to, are you really a Muslim?
Even in the States, you would experience this, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
Well, really? Are you a convert? And I don't blame them for not knowing that, because why would they? Why should they? Right. Yeah. But there is this underlying tone when people don't know, like, and this is something that transcends not just my ethnicity, but if you're African American, you're a white American, if you are from a minority that's outside Arab, Middle East, Indo-Pak, Afghan sort of narrative, then the assumption is either you're a convert or you don't know anything. Mm-hmm. And, we carry the true Islam. You got to learn it from us, right? Because we understand the deen, right? And so it's really, really funny, because it's like, and what is your claim to fame? Your culture, right? So if you really think about it, their claim to fame is actually their own views or beliefs or ignorance, that they think that their Islam is more legitimate because they were born in a country where there's a lot of Muslims. And it's really funny because, when you tell some people in the Middle East, like, you do know that there are more Muslims in China than the countries in the Middle East, right? There's like 70 million Muslims. It's like more than Syria, more than Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, Bahrain, Emirates, Palestine, Jordan. It's like, maybe Egypt is like 100-something million, right? But generally it's like, it's not real. They're like, but we just never knew. It's like, well, that's your problem. That's your problem that you never knew, right? And so there's this constant explaining. So the point that I'm trying to get to is, just to keep it brief, is that I was memorizing Quran, and obviously that was something that my parents thought was good for me back then. And I know they had good intentions. And I was memorizing with this Egyptian sheikh, etc. And I had different teachers along the way. And unfortunately, our parents' generation and them, they don't know better in terms of like tarbiyah Islamiyah, right? Adab and tarbiyah Islamiyah, Islamic education, right? So for them, tarbiyah is, smack. Tarbiyah is, education is smack, whip, beat and shame. And, if you don't listen, we're going to punish you, right? Mm-hmm. And so during that phase of memorizing Quran, I personally felt that, and I know this might sound like really shocking, but I want to say this because I feel like a lot of the young kids, they don't have the ability or the courage to speak up on how they feel. because they're told to basically, like I said before, shut up and sit down. And so I basically felt that my parents or any Muslim parents out there were, and you have to remember, this is the mentality of a 14-year-old, the 13-year-old. So my mentality was, wow, Muslims are really big hypocrites.
Oh wow.
I said, wow, Muslims are such hypocrites. It's like it's like, oh, well, kids have to memorize Quran, but you never see the parents memorize the Quran.
Okay.
The parents are never memorizing the Quran. And when you ask them, oh, why don't you memorize the Quran? Oh, we're old, we can't, we have bad memory. We have jobs to do. This is a good time for you because you're young and, you should do it. Yes, great. Checkbox, great. But last time I checked, Quran memorization was not something done for the little kids. It's something to be done over your entire life. It's something that every Muslim should be striving for, right? Like the Quran verse that says, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ, right? And we have made the Quran easy for remembrance, right? For memorization, for retention in the memory. فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. So are there any people out there who will actually go and memorize it? And the verse didn't say for children only, for little children, and not for adults. If you're old and you have a job, you don't have to memorize Quran, or you memorize Quran when you're like 65 years old and you don't have anything better to do, right? And so that's how I felt. So I felt like the elder generation, because you look at other parents who were sending their kids to memorize Quran, I hardly see them memorizing Quran either, right? And so I just felt like, what kind of hypocrisy is this, right?
Right.
And
so you sort of saw like a disconnect between the people who are telling you to learn Quran,
right?
but they're not practicing it themselves, right?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's just this idea of, if memorizing Quran is such an amazing thing, then shouldn't everyone be doing it?
Yeah.
Right. It's like this idea of, if ice cream is good, I expect, everyone should be getting a line for ice cream, right? Why am I getting a line for ice cream? I mean, is it ice cream?
Right. I was hoping, Sheikh, that you would say that, oh yeah, I already did in my early years, so now it's your turn. But that never was the answer, yeah? Okay, subhanAllah. So hence that's why you concluded it as like an observed hypocrisy. SubhanAllah.
Absolutely. I thought it was very, very hypocritical. And I just thought, wow, you guys are really two-faced, right? You got one standard for your kids, one standard for yourself, and one standard for someone else. So, I felt that, that was not okay. I just thought, no, that's not okay. So, and also another thing was, when I went, like I said, when I went to the masjid, I felt that there was a lot of racism, there was a lot of discrimination, there was a lot of labeling and assumptions, like I said, like, oh, are you sure? Like even as an adult, okay, when I go to some functions, like, not in my capacity as, a student of knowledge, etc. But, if I go to someone's house for dinner I usually don't say anything, I don't come, walking and acting like, I'm just like, I'm a guest, I'm coming to eat food.
Right.
And sometimes the discussion would turn to something Islamic or something. And you will see like the regular people in the room just starting to give their opinions about what they think about the ruling is. Right. And, one person would start saying this, another person starts saying that. And obviously it's not that it's wrong, but it's presented in a way where it is presented as this is the only opinion, right? And I do have this very vivid experience until now. There was this Egyptian brother who was sitting there. And like I said, I don't go around and say like, oh, look at me. No, I don't, I'm just, sitting there like a normal person. And I remember someone was asking this question about like traveling and shortening salah. And someone was asking, so a few people in the gathering, they kind of knew that, I had studied a little bit. So they were asking, and And so they looked at me and they asked me, and I just simply said, oh, well, there's obviously difference of opinion on this, but, for this specific issue, it would appear it's just this, right? For this issue, it's that, etc. And don't know why there was an Egyptian brother, a young man. He is the son of a well-respected person in the community. Not that his father was a sheikh or anything, but just someone. And that's the thing, when you're the child of someone who is a little bit more knowledge, you kind of act like as if you magically inherited that knowledge through your DNA. It's this attitude, like, oh. And this person wasn't even a sheikh. So imagine if someone is Ibn Sheikh, he's a Sheikh's son or the daughter. There's you will see those kind of people where they take advantage of that kind of position. And so he just said like, oh wait, well, I just want to say that there's a difference of opinion. Mm-hmm. So did you follow up with what is the difference of opinion? What is the textual evidence for this difference of opinion? How is that opinion extracting the ruling from this evidence? And how is that different from No, it was just, he felt compelled to kind of put me in my place.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Difference of opinion. Okay, everyone? There's a difference of opinion, all right? And it's this kind of passive aggressiveness. Right? It's like this kind of, and I have no problem engaging in a lively discussion, but it was because the way how it was said, and I just didn't want to escalate or to make it more complicated. So I just said, yes, of course, there's difference of opinion, and this is a great segue to the idea of how one of the things that people say about critical thinking.
Right.
Is one of the things that they say is difference of opinion. Difference of opinion, right?
Yeah.
And it's and they don't understand that difference of opinion amongst the ulama is not based on what I had for breakfast and if I like chocolate or vanilla. Difference of opinion is based on scholastic academic research and approach, I always tell people, lay people, what is a fatwa? Well, when you ask people what is a fatwa, they don't know what a fatwa is. A fatwa is literally the equivalent of you, like for example, if you're in Malaysia, you go to a judge in the court system in Malaysia, okay? And it doesn't have to be an Islamic court. It can just be any court, okay? Or you go to a lawyer and you say, okay, so in the Malaysian laws, there is this code, section, if you do this and this and this and this. And when they come and they interpret that law for you and they say, well, the law seems like this and this and this, it would seem to be that this is the interpretation of the law, okay? A fatwa is literally the legal opinion of a scholar. You cannot, it's not enforceable. It's the personal opinion. So when you hear people saying like a fatwa, etc., they don't understand what a fatwa is. They just think like, it's like some
sacred
rule that just came down. Okay, right? And I'm not here to challenge the importance of fatwa. It's just this idea of, when we talk about critical thinking, one of those things is when you say, oh, difference of opinion. Right. And you have that one extreme where they take the fatwa at the level of Quran and Hadith. And then you have the other extreme where they take the opinion of the scholars as, oh, personal difference of opinion.
Gotcha.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just a difference of opinion, right?
Yeah,
so
and
you go to
it's
this lawyer, you get this opinion. You go to that lawyer, you get that opinion. It's just
it's a free market, isn't it? Like,
Essentially,
free market,
one
you know?
shopping. That's one of them.
So, so I actually, for a while, I stopped memorizing Quran, and I said, you know what? I'm going to stop identifying as Muslim because I don't feel comfortable being a part of a faith that I don't feel convinced by. I feel, because it's that's the thing with a lot of youth. Whenever you see these youth that are leaving Islam, it's not actually based on something within Islam. It's like some emotion, trauma, experience.
Very personalized kind of experience.
Very personal, right? Something happened to them in their life that was painful, horrific, terrible, and traumatic, and perhaps the way how it was packaged to them back then had, all they can remember was, well, this is what Islam says, right? And so they associate that negativity with, it was because of that. And so for a while, I started researching about other religions. I started thinking, let's go look in the different religions, like a buffet, right? Sort of like you go to a buffet, fried chicken,
Okay.
Right? So I'm like looking, picking, choosing, right? And so I started going down all the different religions, right? And so started going through Judaism. I started reading it. I'm like, I see a lot of commonality between Judaism and Islam, and then I'm going down Christianity, Catholicism, just like, this Trinitarianism doesn't make any sense. No matter.
Jazz, I'm wondering at this point, did you have some basic understanding about Islam, or did you just straight away go to the others to start your buffet, so to speak?
I just had basically whatever I was taught growing up, whatever sitting in halaqah.
Gotcha.
That's
Okay.
it. Sunday school. I just don't have, and that's something that I want to talk about later. I'm going to write it down somewhere just so that I don't forget.
Sure.
Is this idea of little kids are not going to remember exactly what they learned in Sunday school.
Okay.
They don't. If you sit back and think, do I remember what I learned growing up going to Islamic school on the weekend? Do you remember anything? No. But what they will remember is the feeling.
Subhanallah.
They will remember the feeling. They will remember the emotions. And what's really important is, so make a note of that and we'll talk about that later.
Inshallah.
Yeah. So I just basically felt that, I need to go and figure out what is going on. I need to really understand what Islam is, right? So I started reading up about Judaism and I was like, this is more like a religion for a specific ethnicity. Started reading up about Buddhism and it's just like, oh, they don't even believe in a God. Okay, well, doesn't really sit well with me. And then it, started going down all the religions, Zoroastrianism. And,
wow, Zoroastrianism. Wow.
Jainism, Zen Buddhism, and Mahayana Buddhism, and all these other forms of Buddhism, because my mother's side, they're still like, Buddhists, etc. Okay. My grandma and, my relatives. So, you will definitely feel attracted like that, you definitely feel some sort of attraction to that kind of thing, this idea of peace and serenity. And I'm just going to write this down so that I don't forget, because I want to talk about it later. And I remember growing up as a kid, I was in a class and I saw this movie because we were studying about world religions. And I remember, I remember seeing this movie. Let me just double check what the title was. So this movie was in 1993. It was called Little Buddha. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it was a drama film. It wasn't a comedy or anything like that. But it was um, and funny thing is, Keanu Reeves from The Matrix, he actually was playing the Buddha in that.
Oh.
No way.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's really interesting. I mean, you've got big names in there like Bridget Fonda, etc. And so basically, I remember
even the way Reza said, "Whoa," it's like Keanu Reeves.
Yeah, Keanu Reeves, right? I mean, he was. I mean, that was the real Matrix, So I mean, forget the Matrix that he was in. I mean, so it's this idea that there's these monks, right, in Bhutan, and they're searching for the rebirth of some lama, right? Not the Dalai Lama, but some lama, right? And so they start looking, and they end up thinking that there is this American boy who is like, the son of an architect or something from Seattle, Washington. They think it's this kid who's the reincarnation, right? And so anyways, so the point of the movie was that, I mean, it's like, okay, so they end up realizing that, all of these kids, like the American kid and these other 2-3 other kids, they were all reincarnations of the Buddha, right? Of Lama, whatever this, right? And so I remember when I was watching this film, I remember that even though I knew nothing about Buddhism, I have no idea what Buddhist theology is. I have no idea how Buddhism was actually a response to Hinduism, right? Buddhism, if you study it, it's a response to Hinduism. It's this idea of you can break out of reincarnation, right? You can keep
break the cycle.
You can break the cycle because Hinduism, you're basically keep in this cycle for God knows how long, right?
Right.
Yeah. So Buddhism was this idea of like this idea of we can get out of this cycle of reincarnation, this suffering, and all of those things, those little parts of you see in Buddhism, like peace, not attaching yourself to the dunya, not attaching yourself to the world, and looking for the truth and searching for the truth. And, and you can think of like Tawbah as like a form of rebirth, metaphorically, this is, the 11-year-old brain of mine, right?
Yeah. You're 11-year-old at this time, yeah?
Yeah. Wow. So it had, even though that movie, really didn't, even though that movie really, if you really think about it, it's just like, okay, yeah, they thought they were going to reincarnate into one person, but it's just all 3 kids, I guess. What really happened is that movie, because of certain themes that are shared within Islam, it had a very deep impact in my head.
Oh.
Okay. And that is something where a lot of Muslims, when young people, when they leave Islam for, whatever religion it is, Christianity, Buddhism, whatever it is, it's usually like I said about the whole emotion thing. It's like something from that religion is connected to something that is parallel within Islam, and it creates a very good feeling in them. And then they jump on it.
Right,
and they jump on it, right? They jump on it. And so I remember I started reading about Buddhism, and I was like, this is really interesting, meditation, like meditate, like Prophet said, meditating in the cave of Hira.
Okay.
Very different.
You start to find commonalities within our being. Right.
And that's the thing. You find commonalities, and then you think like, wow, this is good. Maybe this is the truth, right? And I started thinking like, maybe this life is really messed up, because the Quran also talks about how this world is just like really nothing, and there's another life. But when you're a little kid, you don't really think about wait, they mean reincarnation, right? So I started studying Buddhism, and then I got stuck in Buddhism. So I got stuck on the question of who's in charge of who gets to reincarnate into what?
Oh, wow.
Oh, okay.
Okay. True.
Who's in charge? Is there like, is Buddha the main god, or they don't even call him God, but is Siddhartha Gautama, right? Buddha, is he the one who's like, oh, you're a mosquito, you're a fly, you're a butterfly, and you're a dog, and then you are a pig, and you are a horse, and you're an elephant, right? You're a whale, and maybe you're a beetle. I don't know, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And to me, that was my question.
Who's calling the shots, right?
Who's calling the shots here?
Right.
And I started asking my mom first, right? Because she used to be a Buddhist, right? And, Buddhist, like even in Malaysia, right? Buddhist, but committing shirk in Buddhism as well, right? Like
Shirk within Buddhism. Wow.
Yeah, shirk on top of shirk, right? It's like worship Buddha and then worship, Guan Yin and this Bodhisattva and that, it's just like worship whatever, right?
Wow.
And I asked her, I'm like, well, who's in charge? She's like, oh, actually, I don't know who's in charge, right? And I started reading, asking, and I'm just like, oh my God. So if I die, I don't even know who's calling the shots and what are the standards. There's got to be some standards of like, hey, you've passed this level up from mosquito to a fly.
Right.
know?
What does it take for me to be a cat, right?
Or maybe I don't want to be a fly. I don't want to fly around people, right? I want to be a honeybee, right? I want to be a honeybee and smell flowers and eat nectar, right?
Yeah.
Then how do I become a bird? From the insect world to an animal, right?
Wow.
And then you got all sorts of different animals. So I was just like, well, how do I get to that, right? And then I realized, oh my God, no one knows what's going on. So then I was just like, putting that on, right?
Right.
So after going through all that list, I was like, okay. So then so I came to this realization, right? So I came to this realization that what my problem with Islam was not Islam itself, was the people who called themselves Muslims. And I had to like pause. And this is, I'm like this 13. So I'm like 13, 14. So I came to this realization just by myself. My grandfather also helped talk to me a little bit, but I came to this realization on my own that there were two realizations. Number one, you cannot judge a religion based on the people. Number two, if you're going to judge a religion, you need to know what the religion is about and not how it is practiced.
Ooh,
Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if you look at how it's practiced, clearly it's practiced differently and in my brain, hypocritically. So I said, well, it's definitely not going to be, Islam is not based, it cannot be based on what people are doing because people are different and I cannot judge. So it was like, I completed the first conclusion that Islam cannot be judged by its people. So, and then the next conclusion basically stemmed from that first conclusion. If it's not based on people, then what is it based on? So it must be based on something, right? What is it based on? It must be based on itself. So I didn't know yet what it was based on. I just knew I had to separate my emotions and my traumatic experience and the racism or whatever it is. I had to separate that, even though that is something shaitan loves to do, to get people riled up in those sort of emotions so that you forget the bigger picture, right? It's like this idea of, people hating a subject in school. Why? Because of a teacher.
The teacher, subhanAllah.
Because of the teacher. It's not because the subject is terrible. It's because the teacher didn't do a good job. Does that mean that the subject is terrible? No. It just needs to be represented again by the right person and the right time, the right frame of reference. And you have to, like for math, you need to understand math based on what math says for itself.
Okay.
Okay, based on the rules that it says for itself, not based on what someone told me what math should be like.
Right.
And, obviously that kind of, comparing math to Islam is a little bit, not fair, but it's just this idea of, you have to judge it. So then by what it says. So then I was like, well, I don't really know much about Islam, right? So then I started studying, learning, and then I was like, well, you know what? So my third conclusion was, well, if I'm going to quit Islam, I need to know Islam in and out before I can say I quit.
Oh, okay.
You can't quit something that you don't know. Because if you quit something that you don't know, then you want to ask yourself, were you really in it in the first place? Right? Were you even really inside? Were you even a part of it in the first place? Right? Like,
Right.
I hate cake. Okay. Well, have you ever had cake before? I know. Okay. So you never even had cake. So you can't quit cake because you never had cake. Right? So that's what happened. That was my journey. And then, I started learning about Islam and then I started going to University of Madinah. So I learned Arabic first before I went. And
wow. So Sheikh, if I phrase this correctly, your journey to study Islam, which you took to Madinah, was actually the process of justifying why I need to quit. Is that right? Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was like, well, I need to justify why I want to quit. And if I cannot justify why I want to quit, I had this deep fear inside of me that I need to hold on to something before, like it was two things. I need to know if you really think about it, it's like when people leave a religion and join another religion, two things have to happen. They have to be convinced that what they're leaving behind is not worth it. Right? And what they're going to is worth it.
It's even better.
So for me, it was, I kind of want to quit, but it's not really making any sense, but there is nothing better. I can't just quit for something that's question mark, right? And so, I didn't know any such thing as agnostic back then.
I was about to say that, Shay. So it's kind of like you kind of was curious, but with this kind of skeptic kind of frame of mind, kind of like not here, but I don't have a better alternative. So, I'm just going to find out more. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. So I started studying Islam, learning. And, obviously I started to, take all the core classes in Medina, in halaqat, etc. And I started to piece together this kind of a framework in my head, right? And it's like when you tell someone, Islamic rules are not coming from a vacuum. It's not just, it's just some, sheikh sitting there on a chair and be like, haram, right? It doesn't happen like that, right? There's actually an entire process, the legal process of how the rules come about, right? And one of the best descriptions of fiqh, of jurisprudence, of how Islamic laws are extracted is that like a tree, right? So the roots of this tree is basically obviously the Quran and the Hadith, etc., the sources of Islam, right? And then obviously you have, so those are the two main roots of this tree. And then you have a slightly smaller but important, the concept of ijma', consensus of the scholars, right? Basically the collective understanding of the scholars about how they understand the Quran and the Hadith. And then you also have an even smaller basis in basically the idea of logic, etc., right? Dalil aqli, right? It's a much smaller and it's an if. It's sort of in that computer logic of if and not, right? If it's there, then there's no need for, if it is already in the Quran and the Hadith with an explicit proof, you don't need to go to any sort of logical thinking. I mean, you could, but it's not necessary, right? There's no, specifically like qiyas, right? There's no qiyas, analytical deduction لا قياس مع النص, right? That's the rule that we learned. There is no analytical deduction when there is textual proof, right? So when you have this tree that is growing, right? And basically it is shaped by the ahkam of the context of what was said, the Arabic language, the audience, who it was said to, when was it said to. So if you really think about it, the entire concept of fiqh is like a tree. And the end result of the Islamic ruling is like that of a fruit.
Mashallah.
And so when the mufti comes and tells you the hukum of something, the sheikh tells you the hukum of something, all they're doing is giving you a slice of that fruit that was pulled off the tree. Only the scholar knows how to pick the fruit. Wow. And not every fruit you pick in the same way. Right?
Yeah.
Right. Mashallah.
Right? So the durian, for example.
Ooh, love that.
The durian, for example, I don't know how it's harvested, but I have heard through people that there's a certain way how you get it, like it drops or something like that. But do you go and pull it off? I don't know.
No. It just drops, Sheikh.
It drops, right? So if a person comes and says, I'm going to go pull it off the tree, you would say, then it's going to be raw, right? Then it's going to be, or it's not going to be ready, right? Every hukum shar'i out there, every Islamic ruling out there, the way how it is derived and how it is plucked and harvested from the tree of fiqh is only the person who has knowledge is able to know. You pick it at this season, at this time, in this way, so you don't damage it, right? Yeah. And the damaging of the damage done to the fruit is sort of like when the sheikh inserts a lot of other things into it. And so the product comes out a little bit different. It's like a little bruised, right?
Mashallah.
It's a little bruised in the process. Yep. For whatever trauma he had, or he was angry about something, right? And that's why they said, like the mufti should never give the fatwa when they are angry, right? The qadi should never give the fatwa whenever they're angry. They never give the hukum because the fruit is going to be bruised, right? Yeah. And so so we as Muslims in general, what we see is the fruit. In fact, we don't see the fruit. All we hear is the name of the fruit. Haram, halal, makruh. Right? We hear of it. We don't even know the taste of it. We just know, it's haram, right? So we only know there's like, so that's the thing. They don't understand that there is like different levels of haram, right? Like, is it like a kabira min al-kaba'ir, etc.? Is it like a major sin, etc.? And like wajib, what kind of wajib is it? Is it wajib, part of the arkan, etc., right? And so we are like the end user, right? I don't know if you guys in Malaysia have like Costco. Okay.
We do have an iteration with
It's like Costco, Carrefour, these big stores.
Right. Okay. These hypermarkets, right?
Yeah, big supermarkets. So you go to Costco to Carrefour, right? And it's just like you go and there's like, free sample, right? Free sample, dumpling or free sample, whatever it is, right? And you go by and you're like, free sample. And then what do? You pass a judgment on, is this good? Is it worth my money? Do I like it? How do I feel about it? How's the price? And we do not know anything about how it came into our stomach. Right? We're just simply the passive consumer. Well, that's it. And that's how Islam is being taught right now. Islam is taught we're like Islam right now, unfortunately, is being taught like, you have a plate and we're just saying, open your mouth, airplane coming in. Okay. And we just drop it in their mouth and we expect them to just digest, understand, and be nourished from halal, haram, do it, don't do it, be quiet, etc. Right? With a slap and a shame and insult and whatever it is, right? And we just say, open your mouth and eat it.
Yeah.
We don't think about, and the thing is, I do not expect regular people who are not students of knowledge, etc., to go and think very deeply into these things. I don't expect them to do that.
Right.
Because Islam is both very, very, very detailed, and it's also very, very easy.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a really good point. Mashallah.
Yeah, it's both. It works for both. However, what we're doing is the world is changing at this pace, the information that is going at this pace.
Yeah.
And the pace of how Islam is being taught and how that fruit is being thrown into the mouth of the child, okay? That process is not matching the process of critical thinking that is outside in the world right now. So all these people
That's interesting.
are looking at, they're like, it's like, there's like a piece of fruit right there. You're like, oh, here, have a banana, Oh. And what do? The kid is looking at Christmas.
Right.
Oh, well, that looks like a very tasty fruit.
Right.
Well, they're not paying attention.
Well, it's not just about not paying attention. It's the parents that's just dropping it into their mouth.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so the kid is like, oh, Christmas. Oh, there's this. There's that. Well, in that religion, it's okay.
Right.
It's okay to do that. Why can't I run around and be naked? Why can't I go and have 4 girlfriends? And by the way, me saying 4 girlfriends was not intentional to like 4
Right.
wives.
Right. I was about to think that as well. Like, why 4? Right.
So that's the thing. It's like, why can't I just go and take a swig of vodka, and just enjoy myself, right? Or let me go gambling. And so you have so the thing is, when you don't know what you are eating, when you don't know what you're eating, and you don't know the process of how that food was made, right? You automatically will not appreciate it.
Oh, okay.
You're not going to appreciate it. You're not going to understand the way how it came about, right? Now, like I said, not everyone needs to know this, because some people, you give them a little bit, alhamdulillah, they're good. Right?
Gotcha.
What I'm talking about is we need to elevate the level of teaching for Islamic studies we're not saying take them to this level. We're saying from here, we need to take them to like here, increase it just a little bit, because the way how the educational system works in and around the world is they are constantly doing critical thinking and comparing and contrasting all these things. And they don't hear this kind of stuff, within the Islamic framework. It's just shut up and sit down, open your mouth. There you go. Right?
Correct.
Yeah. So that's why I say that, critical thinking within Islam is such a important aspect. And it's not very complicated. We're not asking them to do, like, for example, حلل النص الشرعي وجه الاستدلال والشاهد عين الشاهد. We're trying to like, where is the proof and where is the relationship between the dalil and the istidlal and then the natija.
Super technical stuff, right?
We're not trying to do that. All we're just trying to do is get them to appreciate where this comes from. Right? When you buy organic food, do you know exactly the process of organic? No. But you come to appreciate that, okay, certain rules were followed, that when it has a stamp organic, that, okay, certain rules were observed in it in this way, and that I know that, I can trust it, right? Right now, nobody knows what it is. Is it organic? Organic, like Quran Sunnah? Is it bid'ah? Is it heterodox? Is it like, bid'ah? I translate it to processed food,
Right.
It's a processed food. All these additives and things in there, and you're just like, what is this? Where did this come from? Right? Where did all of this ingredients? I can't even read this ingredient. Right? I can't even read this ingredient. And it's not, and so that's the thing that I'm trying to get to, is that we just need the kids to have an appreciation of when they read the ingredients, that they would be able to say, yes, you know what? I can read these ingredients. I know what these ingredients are in general, right?
That's a really good point.
Yeah,
It's not that I can make it. It's not that I can make the product, but I can at least have an appreciation of what the building blocks of how it came to that point.
Yes, so I can be able to read the calories. I know exactly what nutritional value it is.
Okay.
I know the serving size, how to use it. They don't know how to do any of this.
Wow.
They don't know how to apply. They don't know, and this is something where I'm also very critical about, even as a graduate of Medina. Right. And that is, alhamdulillah, we study all of these things, but I don't believe like in Medina, there was a class, like a prerequisite where they actually explain to you like epistemology of, so epistemology is basically the theory of knowledge itself.
The theory of knowledge, gotcha.
The theory of knowledge, how do you validate knowledge? How do you know knowledge itself? It would be really good to know, like, obviously, whenever you say, like, well, it's Islamic epistemology, it was like Quran and Sunnah. But the thing is like, obviously you're going to learn about, like Tadween as-Sunnah, how was the Sunnah compiled? You're going to learn that, right? You're going to learn about usul. You're going to learn about, ulum al-Quran. How was the Quran compiled, right? But that is not an independent subject. That is,
gotcha.
It's underneath tafsir.
Right.
It's underneath tafsir, and mustalah hadith obviously is a subject by itself that you study, but they just simply teach it to you in a very, very scientific way. Like, boom, here's what it is.
Okay.
And it takes years and practice, especially when you're a teacher, when you're sitting there looking at these students and you're like, okay, we're over here in the clouds, and how do we bring it back to reality, right? How do we bring it back to reality?
Right. How do you ground this in terms of the context of where we are today?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. How do you ground it to reality? How do you take something so technical? And so that was my next phase in learning Islam when I came back. And that was, okay, I've learned all this stuff.
Right.
And the first thing when you come back is you want to take all of this stuff and you want to share it with everyone.
Okay.
And you find out it's like you're here and then everyone is still down here. Everyone is still being spoon-fed. Okay.
Yeah.
Everyone is still being spoon-fed. And you're here talking about, I was at the farm and I was looking at how they pluck the fruit. They're like, what are you talking about?
People don't understand you. Yeah.
They don't understand, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so that's something that, I went through this exercise of explaining it because, I want students to be able to, when they hear something, they don't need to know it, but they need to be able to figure out like the main components, the building blocks of like, where does this come from? Or even just the way how to think. Right.
Yeah.
So just take a step back. Like when you went to Medina with that kind of skeptic, like I want to know more about what this is about. So is that when you started to learn things from the ground up? Is that when you started to realize that whole metaphor of the roots, because you started to recognize those roots now, and then you started to have the appreciation, and hence where you are right now? I want to know how to convey the beauty of this holistic picture of Islam to the people and get them to appreciate that. To acknowledge their critical thinking in the framework of Islam. Did I get that right?
Well, you give me too much credit. I wasn't thinking that far ahead. I was just, I need to understand what this is. And also I was just, stuck with the frustration of, like, this is really hard. It's all taught in Arabic and it's, and I'm trying to figure out what is being said. I'm not understanding everything. So, it's really, really difficult. Right.
Wow.
So that's sort of, I do apologize. That's like an hour's, worth of, talking about how I got to this place,
That's great.
Go ahead.
That's great though. But I just want to point out a really good point that you mentioned in the whole description before, that when you came back to America, you saw that gap, that systemic gap whereby kids are not learning as you were experiencing it in your childhood as well. So therefore, that's where the real gap is in educating our Muslim youth, right? You've got to get that way of learning, the method of learning up to par, so that they connect more with Islam. They know the whys why they are doing a certain the ibadah, and then a sense of identity will be there. So that's, I think, in majority of the Muslim world, especially in Malaysia as well, this is what we're missing at the moment. MashaAllah.
Well, I think, again, you give me too much credit. When I was coming back, I still hadn't snapped out of that.
Oh, okay.
I was still in this like, ooh, I learned all this stuff. I'm going to share it with everyone.
Okay.
No
And what
one
year
cares.
was this, by the way, Sheikh? Like, just for context?
So, I'm sorry?
Which year was this that you came back from Medina back to the
I came
States?
back in 2006.
2006.
Oh, okay. That's a while ago. Okay. 15 years ago. MashaAllah.
Yeah.
Right.
So I came back and, I'm thinking like, like, mashallah, people are going to want to learn. People are hungry for knowledge. And it's like, it's like, wake up. Like, that's not how it is. No one really cares. See, that's the thing, we as parents, we as Muslims, we sometimes think that, because this is my passion, it should be everyone's passion.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a really good point. We can't
True.
translate that. We expect
don't.
that's what. Wow. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's this frustration.
Exactly.
Even when you are learning, right? It's
Right.
this black and white mentality of like, how can you not appreciate this? This is so important. How can you not, right? Like, well, what's wrong with you? Like, what,
Yep.
I would liken, like, in terms of like, like programming, for example. I don't know anything about programming, or coding, but I have seen code before. I have been in code review sessions at work before, and I can tell you, the person who goes and studies Islam is like the person who knows coding. Okay? The end users, whether it is Java or it is C# or whatever it is, okay? However you are trying to deliver that code through API or whatever it is that you're delivering it through, okay? The customer on that end does not see code. The customer sees the UX, the UI design, the web page, the colors.
Right.
That's what the regular people see.
The
They
graphic
don't look at the
interface.
code.
Right.
Yeah.
All they think is it doesn't work. Sheikh told me this. Sheikh told me this. I did it. It doesn't work. You told me to go click on that button. Error came back. It doesn't work. Right. And so that's what I'm trying to say is like,
that's a really good point.
it's like you have, it's like the Muslim world right now is stuck on Windows 3.1. Okay.
I still remember that, Sheikh. I installed it with a diskette. I was there.
Diskette, Windows 3.1, right? Maybe some of them have reached Windows 95, some of them have gone to Windows 95, if you're, like really, really, generally like the older generation, I consider them to be stuck on Windows 3.1, they're stuck in that, and if you're a little bit younger, you probably experience, Windows XP, which was like the best system.
Right.
It was, if you really think about it, Windows XP was the most stable one.
Yeah.
Second edition, right? Was it second edition? Or no, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then everyone was like in love with that, right? And then it's like the obviously the students of knowledge are the ones that are at the forefront. The scholars, they're the ones that are like at Windows 7 and Windows, whatever Windows is right now. I don't use it. I use Mac, right?
Oh, do you know? Okay.
I use Mac, right? So it's like, that's why I say, it's like the student of knowledge doesn't sit there on a Windows or a Mac. The student of knowledge is the one that's using Linux.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Okay. Gotcha.
The student of knowledge is on a Linux.
Right.
And you're trying to sit there and be like, well, I'm trying to write this code here. And, how does this get translated into a Windows format? How does it look like in a Mac? And it's like, well, you're thinking you're thinking from such a specific perspective.
Different paradigm, isn't it?
A completely different paradigm, right? And there's definitely, obviously, parallels, right? Because computers still work within that same concept, right? There's the input, there's the output, etc.
There's the language,
but they function differently, and so it's funny because when you have like an end user that's like, oh yeah, how do you do that in Windows, and the person on Linux is like, oh god, I have to explain this, or you have the person like, and then the big jump is when someone gets rid of Windows and goes to Mac, and they're like, I don't know how to do this in a Mac, I don't know how to do this in a Mac. I know how to do it in a Windows, right? And so the thing that I'm trying to say is that, even in some ways, the madhahib are like the different operating systems. They have the same roots, right? The same logic, the same methodology, but it's coming out in a different way, a different skin, a different design. It's coming out in a different flavor, perhaps, right? It's a different flavor. It doesn't mean that one flavor is right, one flavor is wrong. It's just a different way of how the code was written, for it to get to this point.
Right.
Yeah. So, with that being said, I also think of it, sometimes within the paradigm of, you have, if you told someone 300 years ago that I can take water and the water force can help me move my mill, to grind the grain, right? How I can convert water, the energy, the flow of water into something else, right? They'll be like, yeah, ancient people, they figure that out. They figure that out.
Right.
But when you tell someone, okay, and this is going to convert into electricity.
Right. The waves can charge my mobile phone now.
Yeah, it's not just it's going to move this engine, or whatever it is you call it, and it's going to now generate power, and this power can go back and do all of these sort of things. We are, when you learn Islam, you have to remember of, how each process is going through. The regular person on the street is simply going to be like, oh, my house has electricity. That's all I care. The student of knowledge is at the river looking at the water and saying, are there any dams? Are there any clogs? How's the water? Rain?
Okay.
How fast has the rain come this season? Will there be an extra water? Is this going to, how much is impact? Everybody has a different role. But the point is that wherever you are in that process, whether you are the coder, whether you are the QA analyst, whether you are the person who is rolling out, you're the change control person, whether you are the project manager, the business reviewer, the end user, the client, whatever. It's like the only way that software works is when you don't need to know exactly everything. I mean, the coder, does he really know everything down the chain of what happens? No. All he focuses on the code, but he has an idea of where it's going to get to.
Right.
Right now, I think we need to have students to get to a point where they can just be aware of that process. I don't need them to be expert in one of them. To be a coder or to be, I don't need them to be in that kind of role. I just need them to understand this is what goes on behind the scenes. That's all.
Right.
That's all.
MashaAllah. It's a really good point. So Sheikh, I'm just wondering as well, because the topic that we chose was Empowering critical thinking in Muslim youth. And this was extracted directly from your Instagram page where you described that I empower Muslim kids to think critically.
Yeah.
So maybe just to set the scene here, like what does it mean by critical thinking? Because, you know, like a lot of us in the modern day today, like we look at the word critical thinking, it's kind of like viewed rather from what critical thinking it probably is not. So for example, people think like, oh, for you to be questioning everything but politics, that's critical thinking. And if you don't question things, you're kind of like, you're not a critical thinker. You're kind of like the sheep, you know, that kind of thing. And then if you start like going into the route of the extreme, like liberalism or atheism, and the fact that you are able to challenge the religion, mashallah, this is critical thinking. So what does this mean in practice? Like what do you say, what in practice, what does critical thinking mean in a context that you're trying to bring?
Well, that's all the time we have for this episode, and we hope that you had a taste of what really goes on in the Muslim youth's thinking from Ustad's own experience. Make sure you stay tuned to the next episode, which is part 2 of Empowering Critical Thinking in Muslim Youth, where we will, insha'Allah, explore the many layers of critical thinking to understand what it's all about, and more importantly, how we can use it to our unfair advantage. Jazakumullahu khairan wa barakallahu fikum.